Ever get stuck with a vendor that's about as much fun as, I don't know, like a parking ticket blizzard?
Oh, tell me about it.
Yeah, we've all been there.
Yeah.
But what if there was a way to dodge those vendor nightmares and find those like perfect partners for your business?
The dream. Right.
Right. That's exactly what we're diving into today.
Love it.
So we're digging into this guide from Procure for Marketing, and let me tell you, it really opened my eyes to how much vendor selection like really impacts everything. It's not just about buying widgets.
No, not at all. They would make a really good point about this whole ripple effect.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, think about it. Costs, the quality of what you're putting out there, even your brand image.
Totally.
It all goes back to the vendors you choose.
They actually gave this like kind of shocking statistic. I don't know if you saw this in the guide, but apparently businesses that don't really think strategically about vendor selection
Yeah.
can end up spending, get this, like 15% more
Whoa.
on goods and services.
That's huge.
15%. That's massive.
It's like, think about it like building a house.
Okay.
You wouldn't just hire the first contractor you find, right?
Right.
You want someone who gets your vision, someone who's using, quality materials, someone reliable. Vendors, they're like the foundation of your business.
That's a great analogy. Okay, so how do we find those like rock star vendors, the ones that just fit?
So Procure for Marketing, they lay out this really practical, they call it their procurement playbook.
Catchy.
Right. But don't worry, it's not like rigid rules.
Okay.
It's more a framework,
I like that.
adapt it as you need.
So step one, and this might seem obvious, is need identification.
Yeah, but it's more than just what you need. It's like, why do you need it?
Oh, okay.
What are those bigger goals? The guide talks about aligning with your objectives.
So making sure your vendors are on board with your big picture from the start.
Exactly. Like, let's say your goal is to become more sustainable as a company. Well, you want vendors who share that value, right?
Now that you mention it, they did emphasize aligning your vendor choices with your values. Okay, so we've identified our needs. We know how they fit in. What's next?
Time for some detective work, market research.
Okay, so we're Googling, right?
Well, they actually say to get creative here.
Oh, how do they suggest we go beyond Google?
Think networking. Talk to colleagues. Go to industry events. See who's impressing people.
So like a word of mouth approach, but professional.
Exactly. And don't just look at those big name vendors either. Sometimes those smaller niche providers, they've got something special to offer.
I didn't think of that. Good point. Okay, so we've done our homework, got a list of potential vendors. Now it's time to make it official, right? The whole RFI, RFP process.
It can sound a little intimidating, but it's really not that scary.
Okay, good.
It's all about knowing the difference. You got your request for information, your RFI, and then your RFP, your request for a proposal.
Wait, so what's the difference? I get those two mixed up.
Easy to do. Think of the RFI like, you're dipping your toes in the water.
Yeah.
Just gathering some general info, capabilities, experience, that kind of thing.
Okay.
The RFP, that's diving into the deep end. You're saying, hey, here's what I need specifically. How can you meet that? And they come back with pricing, timelines, the whole 9 yards.
So you use the RFI to narrow it down, then hit your top contenders with the RFP.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've narrowed down the list. We've dipped our toes in. We're ready to dive into the deep end. What's next?
The moment of truth, evaluating proposals.
Yeah.
This is where things get interesting because it's not just about comparing prices.
Right. Cheapest isn't always best.
Exactly. The guide really stresses this.
Yeah.
You've got to set your criteria before you even look at the proposals.
That's smart. I can see how it would be easy to get swayed, if a vendor is really good at presentations.
Oh, absolutely. I had this situation a while back. We almost went with a vendor, and it was all based on promises,
Oh, no. What happened?
We were about to sign, and then we went back to our objective criteria, track record, client testimonials, financials, and that's when we saw the red flags.
Whoa. So those objective criteria saved you from a disaster.
Big time. It was a close one, but man, it was a valuable lesson. Stick to your guns. Don't let emotions get in the way.
I bet. I'll definitely be keeping that in mind as we go through these proposals. Speaking of which, what else should we be looking at besides the price tag? So it's not just about the price tag, right? What else is there?
Right. They talk about this thing called total cost of ownership.
Total cost of ownership. What does that even mean?
So it means you got to think about all the costs, not just that initial price.
Okay.
Like, setup fees, ongoing maintenance, upgrades down the line, even what it might cost to switch vendors if things go south.
Oh, like when you buy a fancy printer, but then the ink cartridges cost a fortune.
Exactly. You got to play the long game here.
That's a really good point. Okay, so We've evaluated the proposals. We dodged some bullets with our objective criteria. We're thinking long-term about those costs. What's next?
Time to channel our inner negotiator.
Ooh.
Step 5. Negotiations and LinkedIn. Finalizing the vendor. We got to hammer out those details.
This is another one where it feels like things could go sideways. Any tips from the guide on how to, like, survive this part?
Oh, yeah, they have some good stuff. And it might surprise you, but they actually say negotiation shouldn't feel like, a battle.
Okay.
It's not about getting the absolute lowest price, squeezing them for every penny. It's more about finding that win-win.
I like that. I like that a lot. So how do we find that win-win?
They talk about building that rapport, that trust, right from the beginning.
Okay.
Be upfront about your needs, what you can and can't do, but also listen to their side. They have a business to run, too.
Right, it's two-way street. Any, like, specific negotiation tactics they recommend?
Yeah. Think outside the price tag. Maybe you can work out longer payment terms or a discount if you commit to a larger order.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes you can even get extra services thrown in that weren't in the initial proposal.
Oh, that's smart. So it's about being creative, finding solutions that work for everyone.
Exactly. And honestly, a little flexibility can go a long way in building that strong relationship.
So we've gone through negotiations, found that win-win. We're feeling good. What's the final step in this playbook?
It doesn't just end when the contract is signed. That's just the beginning.
Oh.
Step 6, maintaining and reviewing those vendor relationships.
I feel like I'm sensing a theme here. This guide is really saying this is not a one-time thing, it's ongoing.
You got it. They're big on staying engaged, even after everything is signed.
Okay, so how do we keep those relationships, healthy and strong over time?
Regular performance reviews.
Okay, but how do you make sure those reviews are actually useful and not just, going through the motions?
Remember those KPIs we talked about earlier?
Key performance indicators, right?
Yep, those are back. The guide says set those KPIs right at the start.
So you're not just relying on gut feeling.
Exactly. You want hard data, on-time delivery, product quality, responsiveness, that kind of stuff.
So you can actually track how things are going.
Yep, it keeps those conversations about performance, objective and productive.
No finger pointing, just working together.
Exactly. It's about finding solutions, making sure everyone's still getting what they need from the relationship.
I'm really glad they included all this about ongoing management. It's easy to forget about that part, but it's so important. Okay, so we've covered a lot. Identifying needs, researching vendors, RFIs, RFPs, setting those criteria, negotiating, and then actually managing that relationship long term. That's quite a journey.
It is. But like any good journey, there are going to be some bumps in the road.
Right. And speaking of bumps in the road, the Procure for Marketing Guide, they don't just sugarcoat things. They talk about the potential pitfalls, too. And they've got some really solid advice on how to avoid those common traps.
They've definitely been there, that's for sure.
Right. So before we wrap up this deep dive, let's take a look at some of those pitfalls and, more importantly, how to steer clear. Okay, so what are some of those vendor selection traps we should be watching out for?
Well, one of the big ones, especially these days, is like navigating all that market craziness.
Right. Things change so fast.
Exactly. 1 minute you think you've got it, the next minute it's all different. The guide really stresses this whole like staying agile thing.
Okay, yeah.
Prices go up and down, supply chains go haywire, some new tech pops up out of nowhere. It's a lot.
So how do we keep up? How do we stay ahead of the curve with all that uncertainty?
They're big on this thing called like comprehensive market analysis.
Okay.
And I don't just mean, Googling stuff every once in a while. We're talking really digging deep, like regularly.
Okay.
What's happening in the industry? What are competitors doing? Even things like raw material costs, if that affects your business.
So it's about being proactive, not just reacting after the fact.
100%.
Yeah.
And they also say, whenever you can, diversify.
Don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly. That way, if something happens with one vendor,
Oh, okay, I see.
let's say there are production delays or the quality dips, you've got options.
Sure.
Plus, if a vendor knows you've got other options, it might just make them work a little harder to keep you happy.
A little bit of healthy competition.
Exactly.
So we're staying informed, we're spreading things around. What else helps us make those smart vendor choices?
So remember those evaluation criteria we talked about before?
Yeah.
The guide really hammers this home. Make them super comprehensive.
So it's not just about the lowest price.
Right. Cost matters, but it can't be the only thing you look at. They're big on considering things like, a vendor's tech, are they innovative, even their ethics. like sustainability and stuff.
So you're saying choosing vendors can actually be a way to like live out your company values.
Exactly. And more, customers and investors, they care about that stuff.
That's a really good point. Okay, so we've got to stay informed about the market, diversify our vendor pool, and make sure our evaluation criteria are like really thorough and match our values. What other vendor traps should we watch out for?
This one's a big one, and people don't always think about it. Don't just forget about the vendor once the contract is signed.
Oh, right.
It's easy to think, okay, we're good,
Mm.
but the guide makes it clear that's not the end of the story.
So those vendor relationships, they need attention, like regular checkups, just like our own health.
Exactly. They suggest scheduling those performance reviews, tracking the KPIs we talked about, and just being on top of any problems that pop up.
Communication is key, right? Making sure everyone's on the same page.
100%. And those conversations, they don't have to be a big deal. Just be open and honest. Find solutions together, make sure the relationship's still working for both of you.
That makes a lot of sense. It sounds like building a strong vendor relationship takes work, but it's worth it in the end.
Totally. Think of it as an investment, one that can pay off big time.
Well, that's a wrap on our deep dive into vendor selection. We've talked about why picking the right partners is so crucial and how to avoid some common mistakes along the way.
And remember, it's a journey, not a sprint. Keep learning, keep adapting, and you'll build those vendor relationships that set your business up for success.
This guide from Procure4 Marketing was packed with great advice. Be sure to check it out yourself, and until next time, happy procuring.